He was 13 years old, a black boy with a perfect score on his math test folded inside his notebook, a basketball keychain swinging from his backpack, and absolutely nowhere to be except at that corner, waiting for his Tuesday bowl of broth from the old man who knew his order by heart. He wasn't causing trouble. He wasn't running. He wasn't even loud. But Officer Dale Reeves pulled over anyway, stepped out of that car with 18 years of a badge he'd turned into a weapon, walked up to that boy with a smirk already forming on his face, and planted evidence in a 13-year-old's backpack like he'd done it 100 times before. Because he had. And as Devon Carter stood there on that Baltimore sidewalk, hands cuffed behind his back, chin up, eyes full of something that refused to break, Dale Reeves felt nothing but satisfaction. He thought he knew exactly what kind of boy Devon was. He thought he knew exactly what kind of neighborhood this was. What Dale Reeves did not know was who was watching. He didn't know about the old man reaching into his apron pocket for a phone with no name attached to it, just a symbol, the shape of a dragon. He didn't know about the man on the other end of that call, a Korean Mafia boss in a charcoal gray suit with dragon tattoos climbing his neck. A man so powerful that when he went still, entire cities felt it. He didn't know that Devon Carter had been under protection he never asked for, never knew existed, and couldn't have imagined in his worst or best dreams. Dale Reeves arrested a black boy on a Tuesday afternoon and thought the story was already over. He had no idea it was just beginning. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click Join to become a member and help our channel. Devon Carter didn't do anything wrong. That's what made it so much worse. The afternoon was ordinary in the way that Baltimore afternoons often pretended to be. Bright enough to feel safe, warm enough to make you forget that certain streets had teeth. The kind of day where a boy could walk out of school with a perfect score on his mathematics test folded inside his notebook and believe, for exactly 47 minutes, that the world was a place that rewarded effort. Devon walked the way he always walked, deliberately. Not slow, not fast. The pace of someone who had learned early that moving too quickly made certain people nervous, and moving too slowly made those same people suspicious. He had learned this the way boys like Devon learned most important things. Not from a book, not from a teacher, but from the air itself. From the particular way a street could change its feeling the moment a certain kind of car turned the corner. He had two things to do before sunset: the pharmacy on Mosier Street for Miss Glow's blood pressure medication, and home before 5 o'clock for the Tesla documentary he had written in red pen in his school planner. Two simple things. The architecture of a Tuesday that asked nothing complicated from the world and expected nothing complicated in return. The corner of Druid Hill and McMechan's smelled like sesame and warm broth, and Devon's shoulders dropped half an inch the moment he turned onto it. The involuntary relaxation of a body arriving somewhere it recognized as safe. The old man behind the baraka was already moving before Devon finished raising his hand in greeting, already reaching for the cup with the lighter broth, the one without the pepper that made Devon's stomach argue with him for an hour afterward. "You did well this week, Devon, 100 in math, Mr. Yoon. Miss Glow is going to tell everyone at church." The old man's laugh was small and genuine, and disappeared quickly into the ambient noise of the street, the way good things often did in that neighborhood. Present for a moment, then folded back into everything else. Devon set his backpack against the side of the stall and rolled his shoulders. The basketball keychain on the zipper swung twice and settled. He checked the clock on his phone. 3:52. Enough time. Everything was still enough time. That was the last moment Devon Carter existed in a world that had not yet decided to be unjust to him. The patrol car came around the corner the way predators enter a space. Not rushing, because rushing would suggest uncertainty, and Dale Reeves had not felt uncertain in 18 years of wearing a badge that he had long since stopped treating as a responsibility and started treating as a permission slip. He was in a foul mood for reasons that had nothing to do with Devon Carter. A lost bet. An email from the division chief about conduct protocols he had no intention of reading past the subject line. The particular irritation of a man who believes the world owes him more than it has delivered, and has decided, somewhere along the way, to collect the difference from people who cannot afford to dispute the charge. He saw Devon before Devon saw him. And some small, ugly, practiced instinct, made the decision before Dale Reeves had consciously formed a single thought about it. He stopped the car. Devon turned slowly when he heard the door. His hands found the straps of his backpack before his mind told them to. His chin came up. His eyes, wide and dark and full of an intelligence that the wrong people had always found unsettling, moved from the uniform to the face and back to the uniform with the particular calculation of someone performing a rapid threat assessment they had been running since they were 6 years old. "You, what are you doing here?" "Waiting for my food, sir. Mr. Yoon is making it." Dale walked toward him with the slow, weighted deliberateness of someone who understands that pace itself is a form of power. Devon did not step back. He had learned not to step back. Stepping back was an admission that could be used against you. So he stood, both feet planted, and looked at the man coming toward him with an expression that was not defiance and was not submission, and was something harder than both. The face of a child who has already decided that dignity costs exactly the same, whether or not anyone is watching. He answered every question. He offered the bag before he was asked. He said, "Yes, sir," twice, and "No, sir," once, and did everything that every adult in his life had ever told him would keep him safe. It was not enough. It was never designed to be enough. When Dale Reeves found the package in the side pocket, and if the camera on the utility pole across the street had been visible from that angle, you would have seen exactly how he found it. Devon's mouth opened, and the word came out flat and factual, and completely useless against the weight of a badge and a smirk and 18 years of practice. "That is not mine." Dale Reeves smiled with the left side of his mouth only. "Hands behind your back." The handcuffs were cold. That was the detail Devon's mind fixed on while everything else was happening. Not the sound of Mr. Yoon's voice rising behind him. Not the weight of the backpack being pulled from his shoulders by hands that treated it like evidence instead of the property of a 13-year-old boy who kept his school planner in the front pocket and a folded permission slip for the science fair in the back. Not the faces of the two women across the street who had stopped walking and were standing very still in the particular way that witnesses stand when they understand that what they are seeing is wrong, but also understand that understanding this costs them nothing, and doing something about it might cost them everything. The handcuffs were cold, and they sat against the bones of Devon's wrists with a pressure that was not quite pain, but was adjacent to it. And he focused on that sensation because it was specific and real and manageable in a way that the larger thing happening to him was not. He did not cry. He had made this decision in the 3 seconds between the click of the first cuff and the click of the second. A decision that was not brave so much as it was necessary. The way certain decisions are not choices at all, but simply the only available shape of survival. If he cried, it would be used. If he argued, it would be used. If he went limp, if he raised his voice, if he turned his head too quickly or breathed too loudly, or looked at Dale Reeves with even a fraction of the rage that was building somewhere behind his sternum, like a pressure system that had nowhere to go, all of it would be used. So he stood straight. He kept his chin level. He let his eyes go to Mr. Yoon, who had come around the side of the stall with the cup still in his hand, the broth still steaming, the old man's face moving through shock, and then fury, and then something that collapsed inward into a particular kind of grief that Devon did not have the vocabulary for yet, but would understand much better in the years to come. "This boy is here every week," Mr. Yoon said, and his voice was not loud, but it had a quality to it that cut through the street noise with surprising precision. "Every Tuesday. He is a good boy. He is a student." Dale Reeves turned and looked at the old man the way a person looks at an object that has inconveniently positioned itself in their path. Not with anger, with the specific and devastating disregard of someone who has already calculated that this voice carries no consequence. "Sir, I need you to step back behind your stall before I have this location flagged for a health inspection." The threat was so casual it was almost elegant. No raised voice, no aggression that could be documented, just the quiet placement of a grenade on the counter between them, and the absolute confidence that the other person would step away from it. Mr. Yoon stepped back. He did not want to. Every visible part of him resisted it. His jaw tight, his hand still extended with the cup of broth as though he could offer it as evidence of Devon's innocence. As though the lightness of the broth and the absence of pepper and the 2 years of Tuesday afternoons could be submitted as testimony. But he stepped back, because 71 years had taught him the precise geography of moments where standing your ground cost more than the ground was worth. And then he did the other thing. The thing Devon did not see because Devon was being guided toward the back of the patrol car with a hand on his shoulder that steered rather than pushed. Careful enough to leave no mark. Practiced enough to make the whole interaction look, to any camera that might be watching from the wrong angle, like a routine and cooperative process. Mr. Yoon reached into the pocket of his apron. His fingers found the phone without him having to look for it. He pulled up a number that had no name attached to it, only a symbol. Small, black, the shape of something ancient pressed into the modern screen of a prepaid device that he replaced every 3 months, out of habit and discipline, and the deep wired caution of a man who had spent 2 decades understanding exactly how much caution was worth. He pressed call. It rang once. Inside the patrol car, Devon sat with his hands behind his back and looked through the window at the stall where his cup of broth was going cold on the counter, and at the street that looked exactly the same as it always did, and at the faces of the people who were already beginning to look away and continue walking, because the city had trained them to understand that looking too long at certain things was a form of participation that they could not afford. He thought about his father. He did not mean to. The thought arrived without permission, the way it always did when certain things happened. When a police radio crackled within earshot, when a siren passed too close, when someone in authority looked at him, and he could see in the geometry of their expression that they had already made a decision about who he was before he had spoken a single word. His father had been 26. His father had also said, "That is not mine." His father had also been correct. Devon pressed his back against the seat and lifted his chin and stared at the ceiling of the patrol car, and breathed through his nose in counts of 4 the way his school counselor had taught him, which he had always considered unnecessary until this exact moment. 3 blocks away, a phone rang once and was answered in silence. And in that silence, something that had been dormant for 11 years opened one eye. The precinct processed Devon Carter at 4:17 in the afternoon. It processed him the way it processed everything that arrived through its side entrance. Methodically, without urgency, with the particular institutional efficiency of a system that had long ago stopped seeing the difference between a case number and a person. His backpack was tagged and bagged. His phone was placed in a plastic tray. The basketball keychain was noted in the intake log as one decorative accessory. Sports motif, with the same indifferent precision that the system applied to everything it consumed, reducing the specific gravity of a life into the flat language of documentation. Dale Reeves completed his incident report in 23 minutes. He had written versions of this report many times before. The language was familiar, almost comfortable, the way a lie becomes comfortable when it has been repeated enough times to develop its own internal consistency. Suspicious behavior. Subject appeared agitated. Contraband located in exterior pocket of bag during lawful search. He used the word lawful twice. He had learned that repetition of certain words created a kind of legal texture that was difficult to argue against without sounding as though you were arguing against the word itself rather than its application. He submitted the report. He poured himself a coffee from the machine in the break room that always ran slightly too hot and slightly too bitter, and he drank it standing up, looking out the narrow window at the parking lot, feeling the specific satisfaction of a man who believes he has restored order to a situation that was threatening, in some vague and unexamined way, to become disorderly. He did not think about Devon Carter as a person. He thought about him as a file. Files did not have fathers who had died in custody. Files did not have grandmothers in yellow aprons. Files did not have perfect scores on mathematics tests folded inside their notebooks. Files were manageable. Files were finished. Dale Reeves finished his coffee and considered the rest of his shift, and did not think about the camera on the utility pole at the corner of Druid Hill and McMecken, because he had never noticed it was there. This was the first of several things Dale Reeves did not know. The second thing Dale Reeves did not know was the name Yoon Dae-sung, or more precisely, what that name meant inside a specific and very carefully maintained network of obligations and histories that operated entirely beneath the surface of the city he believed he understood. The call had lasted 40 seconds. Bok Joon-ho had not spoken during the first 15 of them. He had listened to the old man's voice, to the specific 3 words embedded inside an otherwise ordinary sentence, to the absence of panic in the delivery, which communicated more than the words themselves. Panic meant the situation was still moving. Calm meant the situation had already been decided, and what remained was only the response. He asked one question. He received one answer. He ended the call. What happened in the following 53 minutes was not dramatic in the way that people who have never witnessed real power imagine power to be dramatic. There were no raised voices, no vehicles moving at speed through city streets, no gathering of men in rooms with low lighting and serious expressions performing the theater of consequence. What happened was quieter than that, and therefore more total. A series of phone calls made from different locations by different people who each knew only their portion of the larger instruction. The way musicians in a very large orchestra each read only their own part, and trust that somewhere a structure exists that makes sense of all of it together. A lawyer left his office on Charles Street 17 minutes after the call ended. He did not hurry, because hurrying in lobbies and elevators and parking structures left impressions in the memories of doormen and attendants. And impressions were the raw material of patterns, and patterns were the enemy of discretion. He walked at a measured pace to his car, placed his briefcase on the passenger seat, and drove toward the precinct with the calm of a man who had already calculated every variable of the situation he was driving toward, and found none of them concerning. A journalist received a message on an encrypted application he checked every evening at 6. The message contained a file path and a 12-digit access code, and 4 words. Tonight. All of it. He opened his laptop before he had finished reading the message twice, and what loaded on his screen made him sit very still for a long moment before he reached for his phone. The footage was from 6 cameras, 6 different positions across 3 months of Tuesdays and Thursdays and occasional Saturday afternoons, on the corner of Druid Hill and McMecken, capturing with complete and unhurried clarity the operational methodology of Officer Dale Reeves. The approaches, the searches, the particular choreography of hands that happened too quickly and too consistently to be anything other than practiced. And among the 6 cameras, one angle. One specific angle from the utility pole across the street that Dale Reeves had never noticed because it was positioned to monitor the electrical junction box it was mounted on and pointed, as a secondary function, directly at the sidewalk in front of Mr. Yoon's stall. This camera had recorded 4 17 seconds of footage from that Tuesday afternoon. It was, the journalist understood immediately, the kind of footage that did not require narration. Gloria Carter arrived at the precinct at 6:23, still wearing the yellow apron. She had come directly from the hotel, which meant she had been on her feet for 9 hours before she walked through those doors. And none of those 9 hours showed in her posture, only in the tightness around her eyes, and the way her hand gripped the strap of the caramel brown bag with a force that was doing work the rest of her body was too disciplined to display. The cross on the thin gold chain caught the fluorescent light of the waiting room and held it for a moment as she stopped at the front desk and said Devon Carter's name in a voice that was not loud and was not soft, and was precisely the register of a woman who had decided before she walked through the door exactly how much of herself she was and was not willing to spend in this room. She was told to wait. She sat. She did not pray visibly, because Miss Glow's faith was not a performance, had never been a performance, was the most private and structural thing about her, the load-bearing wall behind everything else. She simply sat with her hands folded over the Biblia inside the bag she did not open, and she waited with the specific and terrible patience of a woman who had been waiting for various versions of this moment for 31 years, since the first time she understood what it meant to love black men in a city that kept finding new administrative languages for the same ancient hostility. When the door to the side hallway opened and Devon walked through it, hands free now, the lawyer beside him, his face composed in that way that broke her heart more than tears would have, because she recognized it, had seen it on his father's face, understood exactly what it cost to maintain. She stood. She crossed the room. She held him. And Devon Carter, 13 years old, perfect score in mathematics, Tesla documentary still unwatched, blood pressure medications still uncollected from the pharmacy on Mosher Street. Devon Carter pressed his face into his grandmother's shoulder and felt something in his chest that had been rigid and braced since 4:17 in the afternoon, finally, incrementally, begin to give. She pulled back after a long moment, held his face in both hands, looked at him the way she should have looked at him years ago, with the full weight of what she had been carrying and had not known how to put down. "Your father was not guilty," she said, "and neither are you. I should have told you that a long time ago." Devon closed his eyes. The lawyer looked at the floor. The fluorescent lights hummed their indifferent institutional hum. And 3 blocks from the precinct, in a car parked at a meter that had 40 minutes remaining on it, a journalist watched 6 camera feeds on a laptop screen and understood that by morning, Dale Reeves would no longer be the man who controlled the story. The video went live at 11:58 at night. Not at midnight, 11:58, because the journalist had learned early in his career that algorithms favored content that existed before a day turned over, that the mathematics of visibility were as specific and unforgiving as any other mathematics, and that 2 minutes could be the difference between a story that spread and a story that was found. He had written 4 paragraphs of context above the embedded footage, careful and precise paragraphs that said only what the footage itself could not say, which was very little, because the footage said nearly everything. He titled it simply, "Officer Plants Evidence on 13-year-old Boy, Full Footage." By midnight, it had 400 views. By 2 in the morning, it had 11,000. By the time Dale Reeves's alarm went off at 6:15, his name had been mentioned in 97,000 posts across 4 platforms. His badge number had been located and published by 3 separate accounts, and 2 local television stations had already sent camera crews to idle outside the precinct on the reasonable assumption that the morning would require images. Dale Reeves looked at his phone in the gray, early light of his bedroom and experienced, for the first time in 18 years, the specific and vertiginous sensation of a man who has built his entire sense of security on the assumption that certain things are invisible, discovering that they have been visible all along. His hands, which had performed their practiced choreography on so many sidewalks with such absolute confidence, were not steady as he scrolled. His breath, which he had always controlled in the way that men who confuse control with power control things, came in short and shallow increments that he was not entirely aware of. He called the union representative at 6:22. The union representative had already been awake for an hour. The conversation lasted 4 minutes and contained, on the union representative's side, a great deal of careful legal language that translated, when stripped of its careful legality, into a single message. The footage exists, it is clear, and there is no version of this that the union can make disappear. Dale Reeves sat on the edge of his bed after the call ended and looked at the wall across from him, at the framed commendation from 2009 that his ex-wife had insisted on framing, and that he had kept after the divorce, because it was the last object in the house that confirmed, in official language, that he had once been worth something. And the wall looked back at him with the complete indifference of walls. He wore his uniform to the precinct because he did not know what else to wear. This was perhaps the most honest thing about Dale Reeves, that when the structure he had hidden inside for 18 years began to come apart, his first instinct was to put the structure on his body and walk toward the place where the structure lived, because he had no other self to dress, no other place to go. The badge was still shining. He had polished it the night before out of habit, the way you maintain a thing you believe will always be yours. The division chief's office smelled like burnt coffee and the particular staleness of a room where difficult conversations had been conducted for many years. The chief did not invite Dale to sit. He stood behind his desk with the laptop open between them, and he played 44 seconds of the utility pole footage without commentary. And when it finished, he closed the laptop and looked at Dale Reeves with an expression that was not anger, Anger would have suggested that this was surprising, and the chief had stopped being surprised by Dale Reeves approximately 4 years ago. Badge and weapon on the desk. I can explain the badge and weapon on the desk. Dale Reeves placed them down. The badge made a small, hard sound against the wood that was somehow louder than it should have been. The way small sounds are loud in rooms where something final is happening. He walked out of the precinct at 8:41 in the morning in his uniform, with no badge and no weapon, and passed the 2 camera crews outside without looking at either of them, which was interpreted by everyone watching as guilt, and by Dale Reeves himself as the last available form of dignity, which was not dignity at all, but its precise opposite: the refusal to acknowledge a reality that his face could no longer afford to contradict. The formal indictment came 72 hours later. Falsification of evidence, abuse of authority, unlawful detention of a minor. The prosecutor's office had moved with a speed that surprised the reporters covering the case, and did not surprise anyone who understood that speed in institutional settings is never accidental, that it requires a particular kind of pressure applied from a particular kind of direction, and that not all pressure leaves fingerprints. Devon Carter went back to school on Thursday. He walked in through the front entrance, which he always used, because the side entrance was for teachers, and Devon had strong feelings about using spaces correctly. The hallway noise dropped by approximately 40% when he appeared at the end of it, then recalibrated awkwardly as people decided how to behave around someone who had become, in 48 hours, a name that this city knew. Some of his classmates looked at him with open curiosity. Some looked away with the guilty speed of people who had not done anything wrong, but felt, in his presence, the specific discomfort of having witnessed something and remained still. Devon walked to his locker. He worked the combination, 22, 7, 15, and opened it, and put his bag inside, and took out his first period notebook, and closed the locker, and stood for a moment with the notebook against his chest, breathing. His social studies teacher was waiting at the classroom door. She had been his favorite teacher for 2 years, not because she was kind, though she was, but because she treated the subject she taught as though it were urgent, as though history were not a record of completed events, but an ongoing emergency that her students were already inside of whether they understood it or not. She looked at him for a moment before she spoke. "Do you know why this happened to you, Devon?" He thought about it. He gave it the full weight of consideration that he gave every question worth answering. "Because someone thought I didn't have anyone." She nodded slowly. "And what did you learn?" Devon looked down at the notebook in his hands, at his own handwriting on the cover, neat and deliberate, the way he did everything. He thought about the handcuffs and the cold and the ceiling of the patrol car and his grandmother's hands on his face, and the word his father had also said, and the broth that had gone cold on the counter, and the old man with the phone, and the symbol that looked like something ancient pressed into something modern. "That sometimes you have someone," he said, "and you don't even know it." On Friday afternoon, a black car stopped in front of Mr. Yoon's stall. Bak Joon-ho stepped out alone. The late afternoon light caught the gray at his temples and the edge of the Patek Philippe at his wrist, and the dragon tattoos climbing the left side of his neck, details that a passing observer might notice individually without assembling into anything coherent, which was precisely the intention. He moved without urgency to the stall where 2 cups of broth were already waiting, because Mr. Yoon had been watching the street for 20 minutes, and sat on the plastic stool across from the old man with the particular ease of someone who has learned to be comfortable in spaces that the world would not expect to contain him. They did not speak immediately. This was not awkward between them. It was the opposite of awkward. The specific comfort of two people who have known each other long enough to understand that silence is not an absence, but a form of communication that the impatient cannot access. "The boy is well?" Junho asked finally, in Korean. "He is well," Mr. Yoon said. "He doesn't know it was you. He doesn't need to know." The broth was good. It was always good. Mr. Yoon made it the same way his wife had made it, with the same proportions and the same sequence of additions, because consistency was its own form of devotion. "Why him?" Mr. Yoon asked. Not challenging, genuinely asking, though he already suspected. Junho looked at the street, at the utility pole with its camera that had seen everything, at the patch of sidewalk where a 13-year-old boy had stood with his hands behind his back and his chin level, and his eyes full of something that refused, at considerable cost, to become what the situation was designed to make it become. "My son was 12, he said. "No one came in time." Mr. Yoon wrapped both hands around his cup. There was nothing to add to this. It was not a story that needed a response. It was simply the reason, stated plainly, the way Junho stated everything, without decoration, without the performance of emotion, in the understanding that the fact itself was sufficient, and that dressing it in anything additional would be a form of disrespect to the weight it carried. They finished the broth. Junho stood, adjusted his jacket, and looked at the old man with something that was not quite a smile, but occupied the same region of the face. "The same time next month," he said. "I'll have it ready," Mr. Yoon said. The black car pulled away from the curb without hurry and merged into the Baltimore traffic and disappeared with the complete unremarkability of something that had never intended to be noticed. On Monday morning, a white envelope was found at Gloria Carter's door. No return address. No name on the outside except Devon's, written in a precise and unhurried hand. Inside, a letter on clean paper from something called the Changya Educational Trust. Full sponsorship, 4 years of private school, college extension guaranteed on merit, no conditions attached, no obligations implied. No explanation offered for why or how or from whom. Gloria read it twice at the kitchen table, with her coffee going cold beside her. Then she looked up at the ceiling, the way she always looked up when she was speaking to something larger than the room. And she did not say much because Miss Glow's conversations with God were efficient and private, and she had long ago stopped feeling the need to perform them for any audience. Devon read the letter standing up, still in his school clothes, backpack on, ready to leave. He read it with the slow deliberateness he applied to things that mattered. Then he folded it along its original crease and placed it in the chest pocket of his windbreaker, over his heart, with the careful intentionality of someone who understands that certain things should be kept close to the body. He picked up his bag. He checked the time. He headed for the door. At the corner of Druid Hill and McMecken, Mr. Yoon's stall was already open, the broth already going, the city already in motion around it with the indifferent continuity of cities that do not pause for the things that happen inside them, that process consequence and injustice and grace and ordinary Tuesdays with the same unbroken forward momentum, leaving it to the people inside the motion to decide what to carry and what to finally, after 7 years, put down. Devon's hands did not tremble when the patrol car passed him at the corner. This was new. This was something. He noticed it the way he noticed everything, quietly, precisely, with the full attention of a mind that had learned to treat small, true things as data worth keeping. He kept walking. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been judged before you even opened your mouth? Looked at and already found guilty of something you never did, simply because of who you are or where you come from? And on the other side of that, have you ever had someone in your corner that you didn't even know about? Someone who saw your worth quietly from a distance long before you saw it in yourself. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, justice, and grace that arrives when you least expect it, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click Join to become a part of our community and help the channel.